Welcome to the Riff. Today on the Riff, Jeremy gets to sit down with Bob McGurty. They get to talk about Bob's experiences as a North Pointer and as a missionary. It's a great conversation, and we hope that it's helpful. Thanks for listening.
Well, welcome, Riff listeners, Riff watchers, however you riff. We are glad that you do riff, and I'm thrilled about today. I've been looking forward to this one all morning. I have my friend Bob McGurty with us today. And Bob, I am envisioning a standing ovation on the other side of this studio. Bob, welcome to the Riff. First time on the Riff.
Yes, thanks, Pastor Jeremy. Love it. Love being here.
Now, okay, it's not your first podcast because you are a podcaster as well. So give us a little bit of your podcast, what it's about. And we're going to borrow our dozens of listeners, and maybe they might be intrigued as well. What do you do on the podcast?
So the podcast is called Guided Life Plan, and it's just
Guided Wife Plan.
Life.
Oh, go. Okay.
Get a life. Get a life. Don't get a wife. You have one.
Okay.
Guided Life Plan, and it's just storytelling mostly, and through stories, guide people in their life. And if you hear my story, you go, okay, maybe I'm not as bad as I thought I was. Or if you hear my story, maybe you're inspired to be a better person. And so it's storytelling to guide people in a plan for their life.
So wherever you get your podcast, Guided Life Plan, we'll have it in our show notes even, but honestly, just save us all some time and just go there right now. So, after the episode. So, so I want, in our time, I want to talk all things life of Bob McGurty.
Sure.
We won't have time for all that, but I'm going to talk about a lot of different things. I want to start by how I got to know you. So as we get there, tell us a little bit. You've been at North Point for quite a while. I'm not sure. Is it from the beginning? How did you get to North Point? What part of the North Point history did you show up at?
Sure. So we came. North Point was about 9 months old. We came in May. It launched in September, and we made a transition in our missions career. And for about 5 years, we were living in Springfield, and we came to North Point. My teenage son, Josiah, we were hopping, figuring out where to go. And at the end of service, we got in the car and he said, hey, why don't we just park it here? And so we've been parked here since.
That's awesome. So I met you and Twyla early on because a little over 10 years ago when North Point was looking for a lead pastor, I remember having initial conversations with the board. And one of the very first things that I knew this is getting serious is they connected me to, I think you were in India at the time. Were you in India at the time? And we had a phone conversation in India because you were on the board at North Point there.
Exactly. Yep.
and so I got to know you there. I knew I liked you right away. And so in that time when Leanne and I came out to North Point, you were serving on the board in that capacity, and you've been part of our Nixa campus. Is it from the opening of Nixa campus, or were you part of a Sunshine Crew, or?
I've been a part of Nixa for about 6 years now. Okay. When we moved to Rogersville, it was equidistant, and we just chose Nixa.
Okay, and honestly, all of Nixa understands it's a good choice. It's a good choice.
It sure is.
Anyway, let's walk through a little. Is what you currently do. Tell us a little bit about what you currently do. I've known you. We're going to talk about your mission career. We're going to talk about pre-mission career, but you've spent a lot of time in India, but I know you also, I think even probably an email address out there, Bengali Bob. Bengali Bob. So, and I don't think it's because you're a Cincinnati Bengals fan. So tell us a little bit about where does Bengali Bob come from?
So Bengali Bob was kind of a nickname I got in my early career in Bangladesh, and Bengali is the language of Bangladesh. It can be called Bangla or Bengali.
Okay.
And Bob is Bob, so I became Bengali Bob, mostly because of speaking the Bengali language, living in Bangladesh.
Okay, but if you go on like Facebook and whatnot, I know that you live in Springfield. Sometimes I look at pictures, I'm like, are you in Springfield? Like you have this strong sense of Bangladesh culture still in Springfield, which doesn't seem to be this ethnic melting pot. So how do you pull that off and why?
There's a bunch of amazing stories about that. But when we came home in 2015 from missions, and then we were living in Rogersville, 2016, the biggest challenge we faced was we're going to miss not necessarily the living and the daily grind of being in India or being in Bangladesh, but the people. And through some crazy set of circumstances that only God could orchestrate, we fell upon, let's say, about 10 or 15 Bangladeshis, mostly shout out at Missouri State University. So shout out to my Bengali friends, Joy Bangla, Victory to Bangla. And so that community has grown in the greater Springfield and Missouri State community. There's about 60 Bangladeshis that are living nearby.
How many would you say you know of the 60?
59. And
There's a holdout. There is a holdout.
And the one I can't wait to meet. COVID changed some things. We would have big events at our house and other places, and we kind of took a little bit of a neutral slide for a while just because of realities, but there's a growing community. Most of them are master degree of material science at Missouri State.
Wow. Okay, so if you get this and you have background, roots, cultured in the Bangladesh area or culture, you got to get a hold of Bengali Bob. So go to Guided Life podcast too. I'm sure all that's there. But I want to walk through a little bit about what you're currently doing, and then we'll go way backwards. So the last 5 years, after spending how many years as a missionary?
30 years.
30 years between Bangladesh and India.
Right.
And then the last 5 years, you've been working stateside. Tell us a little bit about what that is.
Sure. So my current role, I work with an organization called Calcutta Mercy, and Calcutta Mercy is about feed, educate, and medically assist in India. And so we have feeding stations, we have schools, and we have a hospital and other medical outreach. And so I'm leading that as president and chairman. Big titles, but my job is to help keep the lights on so we can keep feeding, educating, and medically assisting. The interesting thing is, though I've been in this role 5 years, I've been involved in the work of Calcutta Mercy for more than 20. The hospital board this year in September will be 22 years I've been on that board. Wow. So it's kind of like I'm in a different tent, but I'm still in the same camp.
Yeah. Now, there's some famous people in missionary and Indian history, like Mark and Huldah Buntain, might be familiar names if you've been around mission culture in a long time. This is a continuation of a lot of their work. They're in Calcutta, and I've had a chance to be with you in Calcutta several years ago. We may not go into some of those stories.
Oh, come on. Party pooper.
Yeah, I got myself a virus, and I got unpredictable yet explosive diarrhea on a trip with you. And so I think you got some footage of that, but that is not going to be on the show notes link.
You're reminding me of a story I can't tell. Go on, Pastor Jeremy.
Yeah. So, but the trip to India, amazing, and one of the highlights is that hospital and the feeding program and what you're able to do. How many people does this ministry impact on the field?
Okay. And the caveat is that COVID has changed some of those dynamics, right. But basically over the last 10 years, every single day, between 10 and 11,000 people, 6 days a week, get a hot meal. Yeah. The education system, we have over 32,000 in the school system. Yeah. And then the hospital itself is a 173-bed hospital that typically cares for up to 40,000 patients every year.
That's a lot of people to bed.
Yes.
Full. Oh, okay. In a year.
In the course of a year,
makes
not
more
every
sense.
day.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be unique. So emergency room, intensive care, and just a full-blown hospital.
It is amazing. Again, I've been able to see it. We've had actually a couple different trips, probably 3-4 trips over the years of North Pointers who have gone out to Calcutta and been able to be part of this, and amazing impact. And so I love that you're leading that charge stateside of being able to raise awareness, raise funds. And again, we'll drop that in the show notes too, for those who might listen, might say, hey, I'm interested in being involved or using my medical service and somehow connecting, or say, hey, I believe in this vision, I want to support. But let's go back. Tell us about early days of Bob. You've dedicated most of your career to helping people understand the reflection of Jesus, whether it's through education, through food, through dignity, through healthcare. When did Jesus become your foundation? Did that come as a 3-year-old getting saved from a toddlerhood of disobedience, or when did you come to faith in Christ?
Sure, great question. So in early upbringing, church was not a part of our reality. I can remember being 6 years old, priest knocked on the door and said, is this home Catholic or Protestant? Mom shouted Protestant, Dad said Catholic. His voice was louder, and so a week later I became quote unquote a Catholic, but we didn't go to church, we didn't do anything, and it was in the Air Force that I had an encounter with God that just changed my life and became a Jesus follower.
Okay, so you grew up in New Jersey, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, how can you tell someone's from New Jersey if you say, are you from Jersey? If the answer is, what, do you got a problem with that? They're really from there. So I'm really from there.
Okay. And I have no problem with it. I have a lot of curiosity about it. So you're from New Jersey. So why Air Force? How did the Air Force happen? Is Coast Guard not available there?
Great. Really, it came down to I really wanted to go to school, and I knew my parents didn't have money for school. Okay. And I had some friends that were going to get 2 days off of school by taking what was called the ASVAB.
Oh yeah, I've taken that.
Vocational. So you get out of class for that. So so then the recruiters started calling, and the Air Force was the most attractive of them.
Yeah. Wow. So you go there. You grew up a Giants fan, I would assume.
Yes.
Okay. Still a Giants fan?
You got a problem with that? Just kidding.
They're no threat. So I have
love
no
the
problem
Chiefs
with that.
too. I just got to say, Mahomes has got it going on.
He does. Well, Daniel Jones, they're very much the same guy. But so you go to the Air Force then, out in Jersey. Where is that training?
So anybody that's in the Air Force enlisted goes to San Antonio, Texas, Lackland Air Force Base, and you do your basic training, and then you go for your advanced school, which for me was in Wichita Falls, Texas, not too far from Dallas, but that's.
And what was your specialty? What was your training?
So medical. Growing up, my mom had a number of medical and mental challenges, and because there were times that I couldn't help her or do the things that she needed, I just had it in my mind that when I grow up, I'm going to be a doctor. So when I applied for the Air Force, the only way I would go in is if I had a medical offering. And so they gave me 3 options, and I chose medical lab and became a lab technician.
Okay, and so then walk us through, what was that time like as an Air Force? Is that when you met Twyla?
Yeah, great. Sure was, and we will be married 40 years next month, and so that dates that a little bit. So I trained as a lab tech, then I cross-trained into histopathology. Those that are old enough to remember the show Quincy, where he had a pathologist assistant, that was kind of my job.
I'll ask my parents. I don't know.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thank you. So I cross-trained tissue specimens, assisting with autopsies, those kind of things. And
whoa. Okay, we got to pull that string. So you worked with autopsies, and was that? I mean, so you're like what, 20s at the time?
Yep. Live or let die. Just kidding you.
Well, I think we're going to extend this episode. I like where this is going. So was that is it like CSI type of thing?
Sure.
Was it fascinating for you?
Yeah. So probably one of our most interesting cases. And again, I went to the Air Force. I was in England at RAF Upper Heyford, right outside of Oxford. And we had gotten a report. So I worked as the pathologist assistant. So the pathologist and I were called to the emergency room one night, and 2 Air Force guys were getting thrown out of the Air Force for whatever reason. And so they decided to ride the train from Oxford to London on top of the train. And if you know anything about the UK and Europe, those tunnels really don't have enough room to be sitting on top of the train.
Oh.
And literally, these 2 guys are sitting, looking at each other, and one's shouting duck, and they get to the next tunnel. And one forgot to say duck, and literally that person's head decapitated. So we end up going out there looking for the body and so forth, and quite a unique scenario. But that was very much involved with forensics, and
oh my word,
yeah, interesting.
So during that time of working in the medical field as a Air Forceman,
Airman.
Yep. I always add the word force.
The force
to
is
anything.
with you.
Yes.
So
Yes, it is. Did it make you more inclined to want to pursue medical?
I was
career?
on that path, and in fact, the pathologist that I worked for, Dr. Goodwin, had recommended me to become a physician's assistant, which was one step closer. And my encounter with God led me to a call to ministry, and I laid aside the pursuing anything medical beyond that.
Okay, so let's go. Let's look into that a little bit. So, as an airman, Catholic connection, but not really raised. How did you encounter Jesus?
Yeah. So my lab instructor, Sergeant Charlie Johnson, he was teaching microbiology. And at the end of the class, I went to meet him. I had gotten sick for 3 days, which meant in the Air Force, if you miss more than 2 days, you're set back, which means you retrain. And so I was going to have 3 more weeks of microbiology, and microbiology was boring enough for 6 weeks. I didn't want to do it for 9 weeks. Yeah. So I met with Sergeant Johnson to cut a deal. Can I clean Petri dishes or something? I don't want to sit in class again. And he invited me to church, and I told him I'd go just to shut him up. And I said, okay, I'll go, but can I? And I could tell he was disappointed because he thought because he had given an invitation. If anybody's interested, we have this play or whatever. And I had no interest. By Monday morning, I was really sick in my body. And, you're sick and you think, did I eat too much pizza? Did you fill in the blank, whatever would make you sick. And I'm thinking, why am I sick? And I could literally hear myself saying, yes, I'll go to church. So I know it sounds weird, but I went to Sergeant Johnson and I said, I'm sick and I think it's your fault. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I told you I'd go to church and I didn't. And I think that's why I'm sick. And he laughed and he said, we're having a healing service tonight. And I remember saying, I'm not into any of that stuff, but I'll be in church by next Sunday. And when the S of Sunday came out, I felt totally well. And I was freaked out. I'm like, what is going on? And so I got scared to church because I don't know if he had something on me or what, but I just knew I needed to go. Okay. And I showed up in church. And a funny story. So I get on a bus. This is Northwest Christian Center, Wichita Falls, Texas. And this is a white bus painted by volunteers who don't paint very good. It was a yellow school bus that had been painted white. Okay. And it only had 2 words on it. It didn't say North Point. It didn't say Northwest Christian. It said Born Again. So I got on the white Born Again bus. and as I got on the bus, the driver, his name was Tony, He had been my drinking buddy like 2 weeks beforehand.
Okay.
And he looked at me and goes, "Hey, praise the Lord, Brother Bob." And I thought, dude, if you can, I can. I said, "Well, praise the Lord, Brother Tony." I didn't know what I was saying. And then he had me come on the bus and sit by him and told me about the life change that he had experienced. And so, yeah, I got on the born again bus and haven't been the same since.
Wow. Still riding that bus.
Yes, sir.
So then when did that become a career shift?
So it was about 2 years later, maybe 3 years after that time. I, in the meanwhile, had met Twyla and we had sparked an interest in each other. So I worked in the lab. She worked in the OBGYN clinic. So I used to bring her formalin. She brought me cervical biopsies. That's how we met.
Oh, man, that sounds romantic.
Yeah, sure. Kind of like a Reese's peanut butter cup.
Right.
Formalin and cervical biopsies. So we got married and we were just trying to figure out what to do with our life. And in a season where I just was praying, God just... I don't know how to explain it, but if I've ever heard from God clearly, it was that night. And the Lord just put the word Bangla in my heart. In fact, I didn't even know what Bangla meant. You know, so I still have that journal from 1984, and I have the word Bangla with a question mark, and next to it I wrote Bangladesh question mark. You know, I didn't know what Bangla meant. Like it was a word that didn't even have a meaning. And later I found out that was the language and the people of Bangladesh. And so that began a trajectory. Twyla finished nursing school, and I finished Bible school, and off we were to Bangladesh.
Wow. So what's it like going to a culture and a people that you don't have a lot of natural things in common? How are you able to build relationships and build real community with something that probably felt very foreign at the time?
So we went to Bangladesh, and on the way, we went through Thailand. And my wife was just telling this story to someone the other day. So it's the night before we're going to Bangladesh, and I'm just living in worst case scenario. I don't know what the food's going to be. I don't know who the people are going to be. So we end up in Bangkok in this cafeteria, and I took the ugliest, grossest food that was on the menu. That was, you know, you go through the cafeteria with the tray, and I picked out everything ugly. They looked like they were live bugs. They looked gross. And she goes, "What in the world are you doing?" I said, "I'm getting ready for Bangladesh," and ate just some of the nastiest food I've eaten to date. But you get there and you just don't know. You just don't know. But at the same time, I remember landing and just having this holy sense that we're home. We spent 5 years preparing, raising money, telling our stories, asking people to pray. And we've never not felt at home in the land of Bangla or with Bangladeshi people.
Yeah. Wow. So how long did it take for you to feel like you were able to build community there?
So some of it we were able to jump in by people who'd gone before us and had established. Some of it was the church. Some of it, other people guided us. But the first challenge is Bangladesh is very proud of their language, and that's great. Everybody should be that has another language, that has a native language. But they were proud of their language at the expense of English. So
Okay.
you could not, you couldn't go deep if you didn't learn Bengali.
Okay.
And you could get the initial, "Hello, how are you? I'm fine. What is name of you?"
Yeah.
You could get there. But so learning the Bangla language became very important. And through language, you get insight into culture. So when we say uncle, we say aunt. They say uncle on the brother's side, and there may be 4 words for uncle and 4 words for aunt because, again, family is deeper and more important. So as you learn the language, you get into the culture. And when you start learning the language, you become a superhero because it says, "I love you, I care about you, and
Yeah.
I want to know your story."
Okay, so I think that translates to almost any culture, and whether we speak the same language, but to learn someone's language is to learn their story, to care, to invest. And I know ever since I met you over 10 years ago, your life has been touched, marked by the Bengali people, and you have a love. And I think I heard a story once from you. I think you had met somebody on an airplane or somebody, and you have this desire to meet someone from the country that you love so well. Something like, am I remembering that correctly?
Sure. My friend Tamjid, Eta Mader Kota Shuno Balokore. This is our word.
We'll have captions. We'll have closed captioning for you.
This is our story. Listen up. Actually, that encounter led me to being nominated for a TED Talk. Didn't happen, but got the nomination anyhow. But Tamjid was, you might have to have Tamjid come and tell his side of the story in case I get it wrong. But Tamjid was a new student coming to Missouri State, and had a challenge in the Middle East, Dubai somewhere. It was an airline challenge. They said, flights oversold. You're going to stay here for 2 days. We'll feed you. We'll take care of you. And so he ends up leaving 2 days later. Twyla and I had just come from a funeral of a missionary in Bangladesh in Massachusetts. And so we flew Harvard, Chicago, Springfield. In the Chicago Springfield flight, I'm in my typical seat on those small United Airlines seat 8C exit row. You get an extra 1.5 inches of room for my knees. And Tamjid came by. Didn't know him from anyone. He didn't know me. And his Bangladesh passport fell on my kneecap, and it fell on the Bengali side, and it said Bangladeshi passport. And I picked it up, and time was froze. Something happened. The flight attendant said, wait. And so we have this moment, and I pick up the passport, and I hand it to him, and I said, you're a Bangladeshi. And of course, he's looking like he's seeing a ghost. Because I said it in Bengali, and I said, we'll meet later at the airport. And I'm sure he had a bunch of different thoughts, but that built a friendship and a relationship. His bags didn't come that night. I took him to Walmart, bought some things for him, and he was a very prideful Bangladeshi. He's like, I have money, why would you do this for me? And he has his version of why he didn't want to receive help. But I said, when I lived in Bangladesh, there were so many times that I was stuck. And Bangladeshis helped me, so you're just going to have to get over it and receive it. And that began a friendship that to this day we're really close. And Tamjid is finishing his PhD at North Carolina State University and remains a really close friend. But It just happened on that airplane. And he was the open door to that Bangladesh community that I found because of that airplane passport drop.
Okay, so one of our Waffle House conversations, you were talking to me about just kind of your perspective on how you view people of Christian faith and maybe those who don't have Christian faith. And I'd love to just kind of poke that a little bit is when you see someone, do you go through the thought of they're a believer, they're not a believer? What's your perspective on this?
Sure. And, you will hear people say, I have a Muslim friend, I have a Hindu friend, I have an atheist friend, I have an agnostic friend, I have a Jewish friend. We just have friends. And I look at life, and this may be an oversimplification, and someone may argue with me theologically, but it works for me. I see every person. First of all, I take the position that God desires everyone to have life and to have it abundantly and eternally. And so I look at everyone, and we all do. We put boxes, we put labels. And so my labels are, you're either a believer or you're a pre-believer. And we can define and we can argue what that is, but you are either in the house of God or you're on the way. And if I can look at you like that, it changes everything. First of all, I don't have to see you in a context that might be unhealthy or unfriendly. And so you've either arrived or you're arriving. And so if you've arrived, great, welcome to the club. And if you're arriving, let me be a part of your journey, and let me share who I am and what I am and why I am who I am and why I am what I am. It just changes everything. And I think it's really healthy to not put unnecessary labels. Okay, this is my Indian friend. Well, what does that mean? Why did you have to say he's Indian? Either he's your friend or he's not. It helps me, and I think in a day and an age where we look at diversity and racial equality and all, let's just be friends. And if you're in the club, great, have fun, get another whatever the club's offering you. And if you're on the way to the club, just help someone get there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it really challenges this natural sense of judgment of, if I'm saying you're a non-believer, what I'm putting a lid on something, right? And that really isn't. Scripture is to, why would I cast even their future state, right? In something that's an easy label. But I love that. So now you've been in so many roles, and you are a mentor and you're a spiritual leader. Not only of this church, of my life. When we came here, we trusted God speaking to you and the team that was aboard at the time. And then even during those seasons, you've been a voice to us as a church of, hey, here's our mission. This is a time for us to advance, whether it's a campus or different things. And so I've really trusted how God's used you, whether it's church-wise or individual-wise. But you've seen Christians from all walks of life in all cultures. What's a general recommendation you would say, man, if I could tweak the average Christian perspective or the average American Christian perspective, what's a challenge or a tweak if you were our president of, and I don't mean politically, but if you're into that, I might vote for you. So what would you challenge?
Yeah, just labels are dangerous.
Yeah.
And one thing I know, and I'm a storyteller. I mean, I'm three things. I'm a networker, I'm a mentor, I'm a storyteller. And Jeremy, if I know your story, I love you more, I trust you more, and I give you the benefit of the doubt more. But if I don't know your story, we're in the store and you do something that I deem as inappropriate, all kinds of flags and whistles and judgment go off. But if I know your story, I'll go, oh, that's Jeremy. That's what he does. And we just tend to make assumptions, presumptions, and we walk in danger paths because we don't know someone's story. And so I would say, before you judge, label, or decide, just get to know someone's story and get to know their why. If I know your why, then I care less about your what. And if I don't have enough interest to know your story, I probably need to just shut up, turn around, and keep going. And, when you look at social media, there's so much about the what's and the attitudes and the stuff that goes there, but we're not interested in someone's story. And we are who we are because of things that have happened to us in life, and we get into nature versus nurture, but just know someone's story. And I would just, so in the house of faith, to believers, I say, just be careful that you understand someone's story. We have cultural differences and nuances in Bangladesh and India, and many times we're in this, kind of shame where we're protecting someone's reputation, and then it's perceived as we're lying. And we can give many, many different examples, but I would just say that we need to be more concerned about the story than about the behavior, because when I know your story, I know your why, and then just be a part of story. If you're in business today, you could make a killing if you understood customer service. It's an oxymoron. There's customers, there's service, and they don't work together. And we've just lost this sense of relationship. I think COVID has alienated us. It's kept us away from community, and we need community. And I know for North Point, we worked hard to find alternatives when we were uncomfortable and we felt that we weren't safe. But the danger is we just start becoming this island, and we're in isolation. I know at North Point you're working hard to create communities and groups and connectivities, and that's where we get to know each other's story. We get to hear your story every week because you speak and you present, but we need to know the story of the person to the left and right.
Yeah. Let me ask just a couple questions here. We'll land the plane, but you're raising funds for kids half world away. Why should an American care about what's happening with someone I'll never meet?
Well, let's get to motivation, first of all. Imagine you were brought up, let's say we're sitting at a table in this podcast, and let's say there's 6 of us having dinner, and you're dad, and I'm just a faster eater, and I jump in for the bowl for seconds, but the youngest, who's to your right, didn't have his first. You're probably going to slap my hand and say, "Now, Bobby, old Fred over here didn't get his first, so you just need to wait." And so I turn the question around and say, why should we be so indulged? Why should we have so much when there's others who haven't had the first round?
Right.
Why is it that some people haven't even had the opportunity to reject God? Because there's not a church, there's not an opportunity. And so I think it really becomes a matter of, are we selfless or selfish? And it's not fair that so many haven't heard. It's not fair that people go hungry and don't have opportunity. And I do not deny the fact that America has needs. And I love participating in North Point outreaches. Back to school backpacks are a blast. And hearing stories, there are legitimate needs in America. Sure. But I think we got to get out of our silo, look at the whole world, and just make sure everybody gets a chance.
And tell us, would it make impact if someone's able to give through this ministry that you're leading? What kind of impact will that make?
Yeah, so we don't feed to feed, educate to educate, medically assist to medically assist. We do all of those to tangibly show there's a God, He cares, and He loves. And so it's a package. Most of that work is done directly through the church with compassionate arms and hands and people that care. Yeah. And so there's many feeding programs and educational opportunities, but we just try to package that all as a statement to say God cares. And so we are kind of the tangible arm. We're raising money and we're asking people to feed, quarter a meal to educate. We have a child sponsorship program to help in the hospital. And all of those things are just to tangibly say through the church, there is a God, He does care. And they're not conditional. We're going to feed you if you go to church. No, we're going to feed you because God cares, whether you go to church or not. But it's just an opportunity to share.
Best website for someone to go to be able to support and to get more information? CalcuttaMercy.org, CalCutta. I know Calcutta is spelled a little differently, but we've been around a while. So CalcuttaMercy.org.
Yep.
.org.
CalcuttaMercy.org, and you can hit the donate button. You can get the information, and
Yeah, that's great. Well, I love your story. I love your journey. One, how you're making a global impact. I really love that it's not just something you do, it's who you are. The fact that you would be sensitive to look for people in our community to connect with and provide community for. And I know for our listeners, man, it starts right now saying, hey, let me be open, let me be curious about those around me. and whatnot. So thanks for being a guest today. We want to make a donation to the ministry based on just what you're doing, how you're doing it. And so we're going to do that as our way of saying thanks for being a guest. For those who are listening, who are friends of Bengali Bob, thank you for loving our friend as well. And make sure you get your friends in connection with him. I love watching updates where you're doing celebrations and holidays with this community. And again, if you're going to ride a train, if there's one thing we learned today, sit inside, okay? That will be helpful for all of you.
You don't lose your head.
That's good. That's disgusting. Hey, thanks for listening to the Riff today. And Bengali Bob. Oh, I also want to say this. You always wondered about being a doctor. You are now a doctor. Dr. Bob McGurty. You got your PhD. And so what a great journey you've been on, and helping people do life plans and strat ops and all sorts of things. So thanks for doing what you do. So, Thanks. All right. The Riff listeners, I know they're probably standing again. So, hey, thanks for surviving another episode, and we'll come back at you next week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Riff. We'll have a brand new episode every week, wherever you find podcasts.